There we go.
Okay, are we good?
Yep,
there we go. All right, guys and gals, we're going to get started with our geniuses of the peer panel that we have here. Today is pricing, and as I'm going to tell them we talked this morning, we had a conversation, Tara and I had a conversation this morning about how in depth we're going to get, and I was saying based on the people that show up in the class, we are going to talk about pricing. So I've got questions. Kim is on the chat, so if you have a question about what we're talking about, you are welcome to present them at the end through chat or raise your hand, and Kim can see it and she'll tell me, and I'll ask you to ask your question. But now you got a bunch more. See all those people pop up? You got, and they're still coming. So you got lots and lots of people. 12. Two most important
12 of my friends.
12 of your friends. That's exactly right. Miss, I've been on a bill here. Miss, I've been on a bill for, you know, okay, so question one, who wants to answer first? Preston. How many houses do you list a year? And of those that you list, how many did you sell?
Depends on the year.
Okay.
It used to be I was 80% listings and 20% buyers.
Okay.
Last 3 years, I've been 20% listings and 80% buyers. And I've sold them all except for 2.
Okay.
In 18 years.
In 18 years, that's impressive. Susie.
I have decided that in my 5 years, I've really focused on buyers. I told you the other day, I don't really love listings. I know listings are leverage, but I'm not huge on it. I have 40% of my business is listings.
Okay.
And I'm very fortunate that I have not had one not. So.
Okay. All right. Missy.
I don't have an actual count, but I haven't had any that I haven't been able to sell yet. The FISBO that we turned and we actually closed on the day it expires. So, very very close. Yes.
So all the listings you've taken in the year and a half that you've been a realtor have closed. Yeah. Okay. Kara?
I listed 21 this year and 3 did not sell.
Okay.
For various reasons. One is the seller just didn't like me. And
yeah.
Misty, Misty can tell you. One, they were just very, very nervous to take it on and off the market. They ended up finding a renter. Okay. And kept the property. The last one brought us the perfect offer and they just couldn't get their head around actually moving when it was time.
Oh, that's it.
So
none of them had to do with price point stuff.
They've all 3 sat too long because of price points.
Okay.
But ultimately that's not why they need to sell.
Okay. What were the reasons for yours in your 27 years? Do you remember?
The one did not sell because I was dealing with an active functional addict. And we actually got an offer that was great. But he had another price in mind, and so I don't know what else he had on his mind at the time.
Gotcha.
So that one didn't sell. I let it expire. That was a month before expiration, and I was doing somebody else a favor. But it would have been a nice one. It was 5-bedroom with an elevator, 3 floors, and waterfront.
There you go. How long have you been on state? We'll go left to right.
5 years.
Preston?
18 years.
5 years.
5 years.
2 years.
Okay. What was your previous profession?
Marketing and finance.
Okay.
I was marketing and manufacturing.
Okay.
I managed my family's restaurant while I was getting a degree in economics.
There you go.
Electronic tech factory worker.
Okay. So it's all kinds of different. I am an ungraduated student, only graduated high school. So just so you know, there is such a wide variety of differences when you're in real estate. We all don't have the same background. And I think that's why pricing can be so cumbersome to some, because someone coming from economics, numbers just make sense to you. Someone who's a high school graduate, I want to go, can you do that for me? Like add that math for me? So the differences are there, and there's no one way to do it. Just like I told you this morning, there's like 35 different ways to skin this cat. So what if when you get a listing, you've got the listing, no, you've got the appointment, you need to determine price. Where's the first thing that you do?
The first,
And you all can answer simultaneously, you know, or randomly.
when I know I'm going to a listing appointment, the first thing I do is print out the PBA data. Then I go to pull comps. And then from there, sometimes at that point, sometimes I go to the original listing of the house and pull that into, but I usually look at comps first. I don't want that predetermining in my decision, so I do that last. And that's just what I take with me, but don't give away to the seller until I've looked through the entire house and we've talked. But that's what I go equipped with into a listing appointment.
Okay. Anybody else?
Same with me. Unless there's something, and we talked about it earlier, discrepancy that the comps don't make sense for some reason. And then I'll do a really deep dive. But normally, pretty much pull the comp and get a range. We compare it to the range because you never know what the condition of the house is going to be, especially if you don't know the folks or you haven't been inside the house yet.
The first thing I always do is make sure that I'm familiar with the area. If I'm not familiar with the area enough that I'm confident in giving numbers, I ask people that are familiar with the area or research location.
Second thing, right there.
Missy?
Well, I've called other listing agents who successfully closed on, neighboring properties and asked them what they're appraised for. And but I do pretty much what Tara does too. Just the PBA data, I do the cloud CNA, and then I check out the whole house where I even discuss what our range I think
is. So what do you look at when you pull the CMA? Do you search it as if it's a listing, but you're searching the sold? How do you pull a CMA?
That's how I do mine. I will go into quick search and flex, and I will generally I'll put in an address and pinpoint that, and then select the area in which I'll be pulling the comps from and look up the solds for the past 90 days, 6 months, however long.
I'm glad you brought that up about days. We all get taught to go back 6 months because that's what the default gives you usually under comps. But in the past 3 years, I found that 60 to 90 days, if you can find enough comps, you better stop there. In most places, you can find enough comps for the last 60 to 90 days. We're getting into a spot here now where I don't know if we can do that and be accurate enough with the number of sales we're having, the number of new listings we're having, the way the market is changing. But that's what I'm doing. I'm doing the same thing. I'm not going back 6 months. I'm keeping it pretty tight.
The Kentucky Board of Appraisals has decided that they are discussing changing how far they go back. They're talking about going back 3 months in highly populated areas instead of going back to 6 or 9 months. It's actually on the table.
I remember what Larry Disney told us, which was different. So it's still going out wider, go back farther. And you can extrapolate that, but the market wasn't moving like it was 10 years ago.
Perfect segue, because when we pull comps or we pull CMA, you talked about looking at a map. When you look at the map, let's talk about how far away from the house you go. A subdivision like Waterford is huge. A subdivision like South Point is huge. If you're in a rural area,
Which is what I do.
there is not very many that are very similar. And sometimes being on the borders of communities, you're actually crossing over into like Keene and Versailles. You cross over in some areas. Like part of the land is on Jessamine County, part of the land is in Woodford County. Let's talk about how far you go and how far do you feel like is too far, especially in rural areas.
I won't cross over a county line, even if it's a half a mile away.
Schools.
That because no appraiser will. So if I've got to hold out my price with appraisers, I'm not crossing over a county line, even if it's half a mile away. Maybe that's wrong.
Oh, I mean, that's information a lot of us don't have to.
Right. But minor county, so I'm frequently out 12 miles. Frequently, if I'm doing a rural.
The Keene area is good to think about because, truthfully, they had Jessamine and Woodford all kind of
Right there, smush.
switched it together. So which way do you go? What's important to your folks? No, because what's important to the appraiser still. So that's ultimately for most people, that's where they're gonna get their money, is whatever it appraised at, so.
That's right. So anyone else, how far do you go out? Let's say you're in South Point and you've literally got miles and miles of South Point.
So when it comes to South Point, what I generally do is I will compare it to homes similar in age. I don't like to give a lot of value based on age differences because that's a hard one to give a particular price point to. So I always look for homes that are within like 5 years of the same age and use those homes because there's always plenty in neighborhoods like that.
And building on that, because South Point is so large, just as Susie talked about, there are differences not only in the age, but a lot of those are delineated by style as well and the type of home, because you come around on South Point, that area to the right is nothing like the area on your left coming down main part of South Point from Nicholasville Road. And they also run into Waterford and all those adjoining neighborhoods. So familiarity, as Susie said earlier, with the neighborhood is very important when you're looking at especially a larger neighborhood.
So when you are dealing with, let me go back to the questions because I will take this down a whole nother when you are working with your seller on the price of their listing, do you ever ask, because Mr. and Ms. Seller always have a number in mind, do you ever ask them up front, what do you think?
Every time.
Well, not that.
What do you think?
I would say, tell me what your target number is. What number are you hoping we're going to get out of the trust?
Okay.
And I don't give you a false
I do exactly what Christy said. We go in, and we talked about it here just a few months ago. I'll go in with, I don't have a presentation. I use it, just bring the concept. And make sure they see them. Then I roll them up, put them in my back pocket, and tell them, let's take a walk through the house before we discuss anything else. And then when we finish that, well, we'll talk about condition, and then I will ask them, do you have a number in mind? And the reason I do that instead of what Tara said, not saying what she said is right or wrong, what I said is right or wrong. I just found it's comfortable for them instead of giving them just an option to say, well, the most I get is worth. But I ask them specifically, do you have a number in mind, given our market today? But it's always nice to know that up front, then we'll talk about what I think.
Okay. Have you ever gotten a response that was, I don't know, depends on what you say?
A lot of times they rely on us as the professionals to tell them because they don't want to flourish anything and set their expectations too high.
They're definitely looking for me to give feedback on the number they give, but I've found that they all have some kind of idea. Every time, yeah.
Especially now, as opposed to what you guys talked about 10 years ago, when the search options for them were kind of PBA, but most of the newspaper, because they really didn't have access to the PBA either.
They're able to keep track of what's going on in their
neighborhood. They can go Rapid.Zillow or Realty.com or Remax.com or any of those sites now, and they can do a search. So it's not as hard for them to find, in their opinion, what their number should be. But again, because as Steve said, we're the professionals, we're looking at more things than they're looking at general as opposed to their specific things they place value on.
Okay. So when you're walking through the house and you're talking to them, and this is about pricing, although it is about listing appointments too. When you're walking through the house and you're talking to them, and you realize the comps you have in your pocket, or the comps you have in your hand, are vastly different in condition from the property that you see in front of you. How do you sit down? A lot of times, coming into the listing appointment and having the paperwork in hand, and then seeing the property, you're doing math in your head real quick, like you just lost $5,000 over here, you just lost $5,000 over here. You got to replace all the carpet, got to replace all the paint. How do you do that in your head so quickly, and how do you give numbers?
Chrissy, you're muted. We can't hear him.
Can you hear us, anybody? Christy?
Yeah, I can hear you. I don't think they realized that they were muted. Let me call Kim real quick.
How about that earlier?
How about that? Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Can y'all hear me now? Okay, I think we got muted for a hot second. Sorry.
Yes.
Did you know what we looking for from the start when pricing, or what we look for in our walkthrough?
What you look for when you initially are looking at comps. What are the 5 top things? Because you hit those 5 things on every listing. You have to, if you're looking at them as search comps, meaning it's like you're searching backwards. You're searching for sales. What are the top 5 things?
Age, square footage, number of bedrooms.
Number of bathrooms
Yeah.
and
Acreage.
lot size.
Okay. So my next question is how do you do, because when you pull comps, you're pulling comps based on total square footage. So let's say you've got a ranch that's 3,000 square feet, and then your comp is a 1.5 story that's 3,000 square feet. How do you balance those?
Lots of comps, hopefully, because the comps will tell you. Which I mean, we see it obviously now more so than ever, a premium on ranch, on single story. I know this. I'm part of the aging American. I built my house with no steps. I mean, I had to step out the back door, and that's what people are looking for. And you'll see that if you look at enough comps in the area. With anything, if you don't have enough comps, you already have a problem, and you've got to get some help or do some extrapolation or whatever you have to do. But it depends on the neighborhood. Depends on the difference. You say the same square footage. And it depends on the neighborhood. If the neighborhood's primarily 3.5, which is really a premium.
Do y'all feel like sometimes when you get to a difficult one, that you start looking at it from the eyes of one of your buyers who you think would walk through it and what you think they would value it at?
Yeah, I think that's also a part of being in real estate and providing these comps is having that kind of intuition, knowing what the buyer would value.
So the data just isn't there.
Yeah.
To give you an
Well,
exact number.
That's the art.
Yeah.
It's arts and sciences. I'm glad you brought that up. Because that's the first thing my very first broker told me. It's not because she knew I was looking at data. I was data driven in my previous corporate jobs. And she goes, there's some art to it as well. And you look at the buyer to say that's where the art comes from, because you have to anticipate what they're wanting. And how much, and again, then the professional part is how much do you place on that? How much value is on that?
Do you ever feel like, and you guys can just nod your head at this question, kind of a dead end question, but do you ever feel like you just kind of lick your finger and go, well, the wind's blowing like this today, so it's going to be this price? That's the art he's talking about. That right there is the art he's talking about, because when you are analytical people, like I am, sitting down and pulling up comps or numbers or whatever can be daunting, because you want to match. You want everything to match and be perfect. And I think that's the issue that people have when you're trying to price a house, is they want A plus B to equal C. Well, A plus B to equal C is never going to happen when you have all these properties that are completely different, even in the same neighborhood. You might have 2 Ball Home Anderson models, 4 doors down from each other, but one is put out with granite and stone and all these other things, and one is the basic of everything. So it's just like you have to, and I determine what the price is really what I want people to leave
I
from here.
collaborate with my sellers. You feel comfortable. Given their numbers somewhere where within the comps. I asked them, are you comfortable listing if we list this price because?
And number 2, if you have a new build and then you have like 4 houses down and that house was also built at the same time, same model, you can compare the differences in their initial sales price too.
Yeah.
And then that way it can help you figure out
They pay
where
X
you're
percent
going.
more.
Yeah.
Depends.
Are you, let's see, in this changing market, how are you adjusting your prices and adjusting your seller's perspective on prices to account for this slowdown. And I do that because I don't think we're slowing down, but
Just shifting.
shifting.
Just shifting.
We've hit the pause button.
Christy and I are the only two that have gone through a full cycle of that, I think, at least. There's a lot of collaboration with folks to manage their expectations. We always have that, but especially when the market moves. You know, I started in 04, and even though it was Orlando, it was the same market as everywhere else. Just it was somewhere in the high end, but not all the way at the top like South Florida. So all of a sudden it dropped off the cliff. I mean, I feel we've done the same thing here, but we really haven't. I say that, but I don't say it to clients. But we dropped off the cliff. As you said, we're shifting the market. The market's changed a little bit. It shifted very rapidly. Thank you. Very rapidly. So here's what I want you to expect. We don't know what's going to happen, but we know what's happening now. So if we don't sell in 2 days or 3 days or 2 weekends right now, it's okay. But we have to manage the expectations. Where do you think it's going to be?
From the beginning.
Are you okay with leaving the house on the market for 6 weeks to get your price? Maybe they're not. So if that's not the case, then we need to price it. And as we've been doing the last 3 years, we still been throwing darts. I mean, at the pricing to say, okay, it's moving this way. How far out? How quickly does it move this way? And the market's told us immediately. 30,000 over, 40,000 over. That became the expectation. But when the market stopped moving like that, I don't think sellers' expectations have adjusted to that yet. So they get a primer on what's going on in the market. Before, just like, let's get it under contract and go, because we can go right now. We can do it. Whatever you want, we're going to get more. But that is stopped.
Susie, how do you do it?
Well, I always make sure that the expectations are set ahead of time, like Preston said. I think it's so important because you don't want to set a price, let your sellers think, yeah, this is a possibility, and then come back later and say, oh, sorry, we haven't gotten any offers because we're a little bit higher. You need to have that conversation ahead of time. I always like to pull the facts. I'm a very factual person. If I can show them on paper, that's what's most important to me. So I generally will say, you know, homes in this price range have an average days on market of this. And you have to be considerate of your competition and all those things. You have to let them know ahead of time that things are shifting. You know, long gone are the days of houses sitting on the market for just a few hours, unless they're just grossly underpriced and in a certain price range. So just letting them know.
And while we've been talking about it, I don't even know if shift is a good word for it. You know, it's been used quite a bit. Even I was thinking I might use just transitional. We're transitioning to a little different market.
I think it's seasonal. I think we're just
part of it, and that's why I think that, because you and I talked about that we also have the seasonal slowdown that we had. I don't care. Last year we had it. The year before we had it. Nobody else noticed it except the realtors, but it was, it was a little and then we picked back up a month later.
Yeah.
But I don't know that we picked back up right now. So we're transitioning to a new market. It's not a bad thing. It's just a different thing.
It is.
They got cold fast.
Yeah. It's stupid persimmon and seeds. All have shelves on.
When I set that expectation, the comps that I do bring, I always know the number of days they're on the market. So that if I get in that conversation where we're talking about homes and selling everything, that I can always pull those out and go back to. This is sold at asking or 20,000 under, we sell it to. I guess perspective on.
Right now, it's very important because even compared to 2 months ago, things are sitting for a lot longer. So pulling up what is actually happening right now, I like to update my sellers weekly, let them know, hey, I know we're on week 3. This is what I'm seeing in this range, how many days on market it's sitting, just so that they know what the other actives are doing as well.
My favorite phrase right now is, be surprised if, because your buyers on the market, listings on the market. People are looking at 7%. Don't be surprised if.
We hang out for just a second.
And if they insist again on a higher price than I'm really comfortable with, I ask them, listen, we'll do your price, but we'll do it for 2 weeks. And we're going to put automatic decrease in the pricing in your contract. 2 weeks from now, we're going to drop the price 5,000, 10,000, whatever it is.
Have initial, so you can just join the.
Don't have to ask anymore. You ask them, and we're going to do that every 2 weeks. Contract.
Or until it's at 0 and it's free.
5 years ago, what was our which are our new price was $150,000.
Mhm.
And now,
Over 3 now.
yeah, over
In Jefferson County is actually the first time ever the average price has been higher than that county.
Wow.
It's the first time ever in like ever.
For a month, quarter.
The whole fruit average over the year.
Things because a lot of the larger places in
Harrisburg
Yes.
grown. So
You
it's an unrealistic
Yeah.
description of the average price of home in Jefferson County. There's
well,
a ton that are not.
I'm glad they're not doing average published anymore. Now it's
Median.
median.
Yeah.
Or median, so it's half above and half below.
Yes.
But still, 300,000 average. Even
Mhm.
just new construction, new construction, and
It's
larger
like 383 in Jefferson County. Yeah.
for the year.
Mhm.
That's surprising.
So what is the hardest part for you? So when you list a house, because I'm sure the 12 or 18 people that are on here right now have the same issues. We all have the same issues. We just quietly deal with them ourselves. When you're listing a house, I'm gonna ask you first because you haven't said much.
Yeah.
When you're listing a house and you're looking at everything, what is the hardest thing that you feel like you've got to really decide on or really look at?
So when I go, I take 3 prices. I take high and then moderate price and then how fast do you want to sell. This is rock bottom. Managing sellers' expectations is probably my hardest. Like they're like, let's start out really high and then we can always lower the price. That seems to be like what they all generally say.
It's a kiss of death.
No, really, they all still think, well, I hear it's a seller's market. I hear that. I know it is. Yeah, yeah,
But no. Yeah.
So it's just very different. Just helping them to understand that.
Okay. Susie?
I almost wrote down the exact same thing. Getting sellers to look at the facts in the past year and overcome their own personal feelings about their home's value.
So the difference between residential real estate and commercial real estate, which you guys know this, is residential real estate is very emotional. They've raised their family in this. It was their first home they've ever bought. They put so much time and sweat equity into this. They really put in the effort. And now they're selling it. And isn't my effort and my love for this house worth a good 20K? No, it's not. How about you?
I just sold my ex-mother-in-law's house 2 years after her husband died.
Oh.
My ex-father-in-law, and her moving to Florida.
For your grandbaby, your babies.
Well, the good part was she already talked to somebody else in our office who lived down the street from her, but she didn't call me because it's going to give her a discount. But she was actually realistic about it, and she actually wanted a little more. And she was right.
So what's your hardest part?
Golly, I really don't have that much problem dealing with the humans. It's more if I have the curveball of an odd property in a neighborhood, because I want them to understand as well as I do when I'm talking to my folks, to understand whether it's a style issue or a condition issue or unrealistic expectation. No, not really. I can deal with that. But a style or condition issue. And most of the time I wasn't expecting it when I walked in the door. Beautiful from the outside and it's awful on the inside. And you have to price that. I can relate that to.
Okay. I'm gonna get Tara's question, then I'm gonna circle back and ask you another one. Go ahead. What's your hardest part? You prompted me for another question. I can't forget.
Mine is all the extra buildings. You go onto a rural property that has extra bathrooms, you have extra garages, you have workshops, you have metal buildings, you have steel pole buildings. You may have 4 extra buildings on the property, and you're not going to find another one just like it. No. So there's not one exact dollar amount you can assign to extra buildings.
Right.
You absolutely have to have some kind of a percentage number or what you have to find out what they spend on each one. Because they want the number back. They spent 90K on a steel building, they want 90K back, and they're not going to get it. So you have to go in and know what your percentage number is of the value that another buyer is going to see on what they just put into it. And those are hard.
They are hard because barns are difficult.
Valuing fencing is hard. You got a property without fencing versus one with. That's a big value.
And what kind?
It's not down to, you're right. And what kind? It's not down to how what repairs in it. It has no idea. It doesn't matter how much they put into it. So what repair it's in now, what kind it is, how much the acreage is fenced.
Yeah.
Do you find you have to look at it more as a farm, that kind of deal, as a commercial property in your mindset to try to get those things priced?
Especially if it's a functioning farm.
Right, well, if it's a functioning farm, absolutely, what kind of income they're gonna get from it. And if the location of where it's at is going to appeal more to a pleasure buyer, a mini farm buyer, or someone who's gonna try to make an income off of it. Because if they're gonna try to make an income, it absolutely has to be functioning, ready to go, fencing has to be in place, barns have to have concrete floors, you know, all of that. So that's where I get to.
So how do you overcome that?
A lot of research, a lot of calling Caitlin Middle.
Genius, she's a farm genius, yeah.
She used to be on here. And other farmers or not farmers, but other agents who have sold something relatively similar. If it's in Garrett County, I'll call a farmer friend and ask what they were going to do.
Do you ever go back and take the dimensions of the building? And this is just me brainstorming with you. Do you ever go back and take the dimensions of the building, Google it, and try to get a value of a brand new one, and do like an age depreciation? Have you ever done that?
Yeah.
So like the silos that they keep corn and all that stuff in, like you can go to a farming store and Google how much a silo is, like $30,000. Well, this one's 20 years old. Okay, so if you lose about 5 or 8% every year, then this is the value of it today. Like I would think that might be something that would be
the average line.
Because houses are age depreciated on a 100-year basis. So I doubt a silo is. I mean, some of the old ones might be from like 1800s, but not the ones we make today. They're probably not that big of a lesson. Okay, so I know we're jumping around here, but I skipped through my questions. I got excited and went to others. How do you differentiate between basement, unfinished basement, and type of finishes in basements? Before you answer, I want you to give me a roundabout number, like an average of the averages of $1 per square foot that you get for unfinished. Unfinished basement.
60.
Per square foot, really?
Depends on what range the house is.
Yeah.
And just right.
And also depends on where it is.
You have the price. So if it's okay. Is that finished or unfinished?
If it's unfinished, whatever, like the top floor would be 160 per square foot, and then I would take the unfinished part and just half that, so it would be $80.
Okay.
I tried that in my comps.
My comps don't work very
my comps would work at almost at 25%. Whatever the finished above grade square footage is finished.
I was thinking more towards 25.
And then if you have the comps, if you have basement comps, you can figure it out. A lot of neighborhoods, you can still do a dollar amount if your square footages are within a certain range. So unfinished one is 10 in this neighborhood, and 20 in this neighborhood. And the finished one is mostly finished is 30,000 in this neighborhood, and 25,000 in this neighborhood. Put it in your cost, and it almost always works if you can figure out the right number between above grade square footage. That's the price that the buyers are putting. That's the price the appraisers are getting to it from a different.
Yeah,
but they do the same as we do. They figure out what works, what makes it work, especially if they have a contract. But so that's the way I've been doing it. We had the discussion earlier. I had with the Stewart Hall, and did not get the council work for my own house. There was a negative if you had a basement that wasn't finished. So you took what the basement should have cost, should be a premium. No, and you took for that away. However, if you finished it, then you got the bonus. So you went back to the baseline and you got a bonus. So if you had an unfinished basement, it was negative. But if you had a finished basement, it was swung the other way to positive, because people in that neighborhood to get the square footage they wanted, it appeared.
They all finished the basement.
Finished the basements. So that's what the expectation was for the buyers coming in that neighborhood. They didn't want to do anything. They wanted it to be done, just they wanted to decorate.
Because Stewart Hall lots are very narrow to begin with.
And no, they're 60, 65 foot lots.
But houses are 40, 45 feet wide. Like they're for the
space between them.
Yeah.
No,
you don't think so?
Charlesburg, yes.
Okay.
Charlesburg, because I backed up to Charlesburg and it was 1.5 lots for mine.
Gotcha.
And I had a basement lot. So Stewart Hall is different than Charlesburg.
I guess I'm thinking the main drag, because on the left, you got all those that you
It's
don't have.
main drag.
And then
the
on the
main drag
right,
is
they're
the
all
main-
like,
Yeah, they're smaller.
Yeah.
On Hayes Boulevard.
Yeah.
And they are not as pricey as the ones within the neighborhood.
so when you walk down there in the basement and you see the condition is very high finishes, you know, stone and tile and granite, all these beautiful things. And your comps are different. Maybe they're just regular finishes. How do you determine? Do you go to each of the higher finishes and add value? Let's say, do you go to the kitchen and you look at the kitchen in the basement? Let's say there's a second kitchen, and the kitchen in the basement has granite, but your comp only has Formica. Do you add a $2,000 or $2,500 difference solely because there's granite?
I do.
You do? Okay.
So
So do you do that with tile versus carpet or hardwood versus, or LVP versus?
not so much with the flooring.
Okay.
Although there is a big price difference when you're installing the flooring, so I can see where somebody would. I don't necessarily do that, but if I see a noticeable difference with, you know, yes, you've got an old Formica countertop versus a square marble. Yes, I do feel that I have to put a different price point on that. With that being said, I also go back and try to figure out what would it cost to finish it at this level versus finishing it at this level, and then doing a percentage of that somehow.
Okay.
That appreciation thing we were discussing.
So if you have a house that's 25 years old, and you have a house that's 5 years old, 25-year-old house, let's just say it's a home simply. Yes, the 25-year-old house is the same model as the 5-year-old house. It's the closest comparable that you have. The only difference is in age. How do you justify the value difference? Because owners are going to know, oh, that one's a little older, but they're not going to relate. Well, that one's 12 years older than mine, or whatever it may be. So that one's worth less, or mine's worth more, or vice versa.
Hence, 25-year mark, everything's been replaced. Roof,
Yeah.
your appliances, probably your flooring at the same time, and at least one kitchen remodel. Probably not every time, but with houses built since 1975, I say everything's gone through a kitchen remodel. Older houses, it kind of depends on how long people live there, but yeah, it's everything's been replaced in that time. If they're close together, if it's 10 years apart in them, maybe nothing's been updated. And I think there would be a difference there if you went apples to apples.
Okay. So how about a regentrified neighborhood? One that's doing a turnover. There's houses that are selling over here and they're completely okay. They're completely average houses, but people are buying them and they're flipping them and remodeling them. And now you're going from 300,000 to 500,000. How do you justify to a seller that yes, this one down the street here sold for 500 because they came in and redid it all, but your service only worth 300 because you hadn't done that. So similar, whatever, they may be a garage different. How do you come in and say, do you say, if you do this, then we can get this? Or do you say, let's aim for this?
I'll pull up the listing.
The photos.
Show them all the photos of why that happened. So
Another way of managing their expectations.
Yeah.
I mean, they spent $100,000 taking on all the risk to do this, and now they're fine. And there's been enough in this neighborhood now that have been done. Buyers are coming in looking for
that time.
That home, and they're going to pay a premium to not have to do anything. It's all been done. So they can walk in with family. Things.
I like to use the term bringing it up to market expectations. Buyers' expectations.
Okay.
I think it comes down to the very first thing you do at a listing appointment is find out what their expectations are, what their goals are. So the best practice that we're taught, in real estate school early on, is you find out what their goals are. Is it to sell fast? Is it to sell for the top dollar? Is it to sell in a certain time frame and not too soon, not too early? So you have that list in front of you to go on. Well, okay, if top dollar is our goal, then this is what we have to do to get to it. And that gives you a lead in to say, all right, we're money 500 on this really $300,000 house. These are the list of items you have to do to get there.
And they have to be well done. They have to be documented. Permitted.
Yeah.
Well, we've all got the same seller. I said, oh, I can do that. I can do that in a week. And they can't do it, and they didn't do it in years. They had the time to do it and skills.
Do you guys have a listing presentation?
No.
Do you have like real quick, just highlight what is your process?
I tell them a little bit about me.
Mm-hmm.
I tell them a little bit about my process, and there I've included tips to get the house ready for market, tips to get the house ready for photos, and like a map of this is step 1, step 2, step 3, just so they can expect it ahead of time.
Okay.
Maybe I do. Maybe I have a halfway.
Do you have one?
I would say more like I have a routine
Mm-hmm.
that I go through. I feel like I stay the same routine
Okay.
pretty much every single time. I go through the same steps pretty much every time. I make generally the same kind of notes every time, but not a formal presentation.
I like that. That's I would describe mine.
A routine. Yeah. Do you have a routine? That's basically. Do you have any suggestions for people who are struggling with pricing their homes? Struggling with pricing their listings?
Ooh.
Yes.
Surprise.
Not you, Brett.
Well, I just think I have a story. I'm making some really short. When I moved to Orlando, I got my license. The only people I knew at the time besides my neighbors were my sister, brother-in-law, and their kids, and my sister is a realtor. So I had nobody to talk to.
Mm-hmm.
And she wasn't doing anything. She was only doing stuff for investment.
Mm-hmm.
And then the occasional that my brother-in-law was sent it. So I sat in the office and I did comps for my neighborhood, which was about 1,000 homes at the time. And what was going on, not only kind of price things, but also what was happening, and found out going through month to month, we were appreciating it at 4% a month that time in mid-04.
Mm-hmm.
So when I got my first listing, I knew exactly what was going on. You have to do them. You have to
practice,
and you have to and get others' opinions. I sat in the office floor time, which most of you guys don't know what that is. I sat in the office, and unless somebody was in there on the phone doing comps, there were basically 4 models in each of the 3 sections of my neighborhood, plus a custom neighborhood, and I could do comps medium. How much is the conservation? That's up to green space like we have here. Golf course lot on the fairway, golf course lot, around the green.
no variables, know the area.
Yeah, all those variables that you have. It was easy because I had a set amount of variables that I could work with. And I saw what it was doing. So when I started walking around to my yard sales with my Hawaiian shirt and my shorts and my name tag on, much to the chagrin of my wife, and asked them if they knew how much their house was worth, I knew. And it surprised them. You know, I got a lot of listings doing that when I was starting up, but I practiced. I did a lot of practice because I didn't know.
So just pick a random house and pull comps on.
Pull a neighborhood. Say, random house, or you know, say in Waterford, pull up a 2,500 square foot 2-story basement. Oh, how many are you gonna get? A lot. And you can see the progression of what's going on in that neighborhood, and then pick another neighborhood and do the same thing. You don't have to dive in deep. Use the set amount of variables. Bedrooms, bathrooms, finish of the basement. Is it or is it not finished? And how much of that basement is finished? And there's not a lot of difference in the lots. Like in Waterford, Pinnacle, I mean, none of them are really flat, so you can almost look at it. It makes it harder for you. But practice, do it. Just do it, and do it, and do it, and do it until you're comfortable, until you're confident. So when you're confident, you walk in, you go, I know what's going on for your house in this neighborhood.
Does anybody else have any more suggestions? Thank you for that.
Don't know how to answer the question, but my Zillow estimate is this. How do you combat that question? Say what I do, but I would love to hear what else does.
Say what you did first.
My first is always that I point out, well, Zillow can only see public data. They see number of bedrooms, bathrooms, square footage, and lot size. They cannot see your finishes. They cannot see your neighbor's finishes. They do not know the value of the neighborhood or the desirability of your neighborhood. They don't know the value of your schools. They only see public data. So it's an algorithm, and they cannot price your house with an algorithm. And I have never had anyone argue that with me or come back with anything else.
All you add to that is like the eye opening that they never inside your house. They don't know what you have here.
Right. Or what you've done.
What you've done.
From the last one.
Exactly.
Now with the, go ahead. I want to hear what your advice is.
Well, I know at one point, and I use this every now and then, the CEO of Zillow sold his house significantly less than what his estimate was, and was offering a lot of money to the person that could perfect their algorithm. And it's just not possible because of all the things that have been mentioned.
Too many variables.
Yeah.
Too many variables. No art, all science.
Yeah. How about you?
I Sharon, is just that they pulled information off PBA, they have no idea the upgrades you've done, the value that you've added to your house. And, yeah.
How about advice to newer or struggling? Not even newer, because there's still times I sit down. Oh, my favorite / least favorite / oh no, what do I do? Comment that I get from you all is taking how many prices down. Oh, haven't seen it. Let me bump out this magic ball, but I try to help as much as I can, simply from a data point, perspective. You guys have to adjust it based on what you see. But like, what are things that, because that's from agents of all ranges. What are suggestions besides practice? Because that's a big one. But
it is a huge one. And I've noticed if I go down to do comps, if I haven't done them in a while, it takes me a minute to get back into it. Absolutely. It takes me a minute to get into the mentality of, okay, this is what I need to be doing. This is where I need to find the data. So practice is huge.
And not only the for a while, but not done in a particular neighborhood for a while.
Yeah.
There's so many neighborhoods and so many variables within those neighborhoods.
Yeah.
That it takes a minute.
Yeah. My recommendation is just to put some time into figuring out the factual data. If you have factual data, things written in front of you that you can use as proof, then you will be confident in what you were saying. And that's a lot of real estate is confident.
What programs do you use? We have RPR, we have Cloud CMA, we have Estimate. What programs do you use that you feel like fits out or helps you gather the information the best way? And then, do you use RPR? Do you use Cloud CMA?
I use Cloud CMA, but I'm always looking for another resource.
RPR is it's from NAR. About 12 years ago, LBAR, now Bluegrass Realtors, implemented it, and it is only as good as the information that is in it. Meaning, it goes out to all the local PDAs and it pulls the information from those PDAs, and then it analytically designs this really pretty little thing. It pulls schools, it pulls statistics, it pulls all these other things in there too. So it's a very full packet of information. It's not just a CMA. However, a lot of the listings I have found, and this is me answering my question, a lot of the listings I have found that for you is not necessarily a fantastic comp.
Those are not the numbers I like either.
Okay.
I myself having to adjust them a lot when I use RPR.
Okay.
Plus, I feel like there's about 28-30 extra pages in those reports, so I prefer not to use RPR.
I only tried it once.
I use Flex.
You use Flex.
Yeah.
Just search on Flex.
Well, you can put your own adjustments into Flex. So you can add values to certain aspects of homes. So if you click 10 homes you want to compare, you can auto adjust those with your pre-populated adjustments. And I use, I was given a couple of lists from different appraisers back when I started real estate. So it's probably dated, it's probably very dated.
You need that about 100%, yeah.
Yeah, but that's what I started with, is putting the contributive values of certain aspects, like per square foot, age, per year, that kind of thing. And that's where I start. And then I'll go in and do my own adjustments to those.
Do you guys run just basic 300,000 divided by 1,200 square feet is this price per square foot? Let's see how it matches the 3 or 4 comps that I've been able to
Sometimes,
do.
You come up on Flex and set your things up right the price, the listed price per square foot and the sold price per square foot. What I found, and just kind of epiphany just came to me talking to folks here on panel, we're all confident in the price. No matter what we use. And that's what the listing, that's what the sellers want. I found early on that I took all this bookend of stuff and they didn't care. They didn't care how I got them. They wanted to know the basic things. They knew what their neighbors had, what their neighbors kind of sold most times. They wanted to know what you thought and what pricing you were looking at. How long do you think it would take to sell it? And I always tell them, Now, confident in the market. The market's going to tell us my opinion of the market. That's what I'm going to give you, and that's what we're going to work from, because I've been doing this a while and doing this pretty well. I took my famous stories. I've been wrong on one price, and that's the price.
Yeah.
I knew I didn't have enough information because it was one of those special cases.
Do you ever just call Mercy and say, let's get an proposal, I'll pay you?
I have once.
Yeah.
I will pay for it once we close.
But what the reason
this is so difficult.
The reason that I knew I didn't price it correctly, because the seller said, can we please price it? And this was 2006. Can we please? I was hired. I had 189, and she wanted to price it 199. So, because I really wasn't confident in pricing it appeared to be. And I told them all the reasons, because you're in a nicer neighborhood, a nicer condo community than all the ones surrounding you. And they're all lesser than you are, and nothing is sold. But there's two that are priced by realtors high that have been sitting on the market. So anywhere between there and here, if that's where you want to price it, we'll sit down in 2 weeks if it doesn't sell. Same day, put on market on Friday, it sold Friday night. I was wrong. I was confident, but I was wrong. I listened to myself.
So that's good. So here's my next question. And I was trying to do that before I forgot. I'm son again, that's how fleeting my brain is right now. Do you look, here it is, I got it, it came back. Do you look at actives, intending, and contingents when you're pricing?
Absolutely.
When it's raw, do you also consider, because there's less of those, less like larger acre flats now, do you consider vacant land to determine value for the land, and then look up like houses that are similar houses but with less acreage so you can get the value of the house?
Only if there's a discrepancy more than 20 acres in my box.
Okay.
If I'm under 20 acres, I don't usually have to do that.
Okay.
But if I'm talking about a 45 acre property and 120, something like that, oh yeah, I'm looking at every acreage example I've got to get an accurate price per acre.
Okay.
Every example.
Perfect. So when you're looking at those things, and you do have, did you say less than 20 acres difference?
Yeah, less than 20, I don't usually have to.
Why?
Yeah, that was my next question. Why? Yeah.
If it's like, I mean, okay, if we're talking about 2 versus 20, yes.
Okay.
I'm talking about if we're in a range of between.
So like 150 versus 170.
Yes, or even 80 versus 100.
The reason I asked is because of septic requirements.
Well, when you're in the rural,
It's all septic.
It's all septic.
But what I mean is, though, there are some counties that limit the size of your land that you must have minimum before you can put septic in.
You mean a second septic? So like 40 acre minimums. So like 40 acre minimums and that. That's what he's talking about.
Yeah.
And there's other counties too that are close by.
Jessamine County's filed, but it has to be very further
Right.
down.
I can't remember what.
So what he's talking about is he's talking about these per acre minimums that they require for you to put a residence on vacant land. So Fayette County has a 40 acre minimum. Jessamine County has a 5 acre minimum. Woodford has what?
I thought it was 3, but it may be 5.
Maybe it's 5. I think it's 5 now.
Okay.
They do a lot of 5s 20, 30 years ago. So my assumption is still.
So the further you go out, like Garrett, Lancaster, Harrisburg, all those, they probably don't have a strict minimum because they're not trying to protect a culture of bluegrass
And
or
that's
whatever.
in that county grandfather, so it's grandfathered in because you had one there. The house has a foundation there, so you kind of grandfathered into the 4 acres I sold on Todd Road.
Yeah.
Years ago.
Yeah.
It's still in septic.
So do you have that differential, and how do you adjust for the acreage? How do you value per acre? Is there a common value per acre within a community? Like if it's cattle land, okay, cattle land in Gary County is worth X per acre. If it's horse land in Woodford County is worth X per acre. Do you just know that information?
Some counties.
Okay. And then where did you find it? Was it experience?
Yeah, I mean, like Aaron, I know because I sold so many different styles of land.
Okay.
Completely hunting, unusable other than hunting. I sold farm, I sold money earning.
So yes, I know the price per acre pretty much anywhere in here. 13.5
Okay,
in most areas.
okay.
That's with appropriate fencing and.
No, it's nothing.
That's bland. That's just
Nothing.
nothing. Yeah.
It's about
Mm-hmm.
what you, 13.5 is what mine. Not
It's usually only hunting if you can't, it's not really that much usable space.
And it's still bad. Yeah.
Yeah,
how much is planned here for 8 to 11?
Okay.
I'm not gonna go under 8 for much.
Land is something that they're not redoing.
But if you go to 25 or if you go to Boyle, you've got Junction City, you're gonna have 6.5. Whereas, you know, for some acres, I'm looking at that. This is kind of a whole new thing we learn more on Boyle County.
Is that like distance from a point? Because that we see that residential, not as much now as we did before, but it's distance from Lexington was lower dollar per square foot.
Not there. It's not about Lexington. It's Bladress versus yeah.
Yeah. It's literally what's your
Really?
address.
That's interesting.
Because Harrisburg is the same way.
That house that is sold is actually, I mean, it said welcome to Junction City before you turned off. But
Garrett's become more about this is
If you're a name, well, you're not driving a license every day. I mean, Tara does. There. So we've got about, well, technically 2 minutes, but I know I had Tara for at least 5 more. Do you have any questions for our genius panelists who I have pounded with just thrown scenarios at them? If you, I can't see anybody. I can see Paul, I can see y'all. Does anybody have any questions? I get asked pricing questions so many times in a week. I know there's no way that you don't have any questions.
Yeah, if you want to unmute yourself, we'll just type it in.
One thing I've always been good at is asking questions.
Hey, it's Paige.
Hey, Christy. Paige has a question.
I think we look very boring.
No, not at all. You look like don't ask me, don't ask me.
Right before this.
Oh, I've got it. It's in that fridge. Paul showed up, so did the beer. It's full of the beer. Yeah.
Hey, Christy. Paige has a question.
So, do you guys have any questions for each other? You asked a zero question a second ago. Did I forget anything?
Hey, Christy, can you hear me? Oh.
Past few weeks, and I did a CMA class, and I had a house I was living in, had a gorgeous pool, and I was asking the guy, how would you have pumped that? There was no other pools, and he said, just keep going out till you find a pool. I don't care how far away it is. Is that legit?
No.
Okay.
So let's talk about pools. I know you have the internal pool because you came from Florida, so I'm gonna ask you ladies. Yeah, well, I mean, you have tons of experience in Florida, but I'm gonna ask you two ladies. Let's talk about pools because that's actually huge. In ground versus above ground versus year round. I think it's sold in the building pool. I've never seen ever in anything. That's crazy. So how do you do pools?
I don't add any value to the background pool.
I don't either.
Okay. Smart.
One time I added $5,000.
It depends.
$5,000 for an above ground pool one time because it had a very elaborate deck system around it.
Yeah.
And that is the only
Paige
one.
has a
That's the
question.
value, that's what the appraisal is, the value is extended deck.
It's a deck.
Because I had one.
Yep.
And I had a huge deck, and I got value for the deck, but I think that's what the buyers.
So what's your number for in ground?
What's your number for ground?
I would like to give it some sort of value.
How much percent did you get on what they spent? Because every pool owner knows how much they spent to put that sucker in.
Yeah. I think it was Larry Dickey that told me. He gave me a roundabout percent, but it was somewhere between like 15 and 20%.
I've always been told 30.
I was gonna say 25.
So it's very close. We're all very, very close.
But they're putting it in
what they spent.
They put it in themselves, and that's what they paid for.
So if they put a pool in for $30,000, there's no other comps. Like pools do not compare. They do, but they don't. Let's just say they don't. So you take how much did you put this pool in for? Well, I spent $30,000 on the pool. I spent another $7,000 on the little concrete surround thing. So you're in it for, let's say, $40,000. I break their heart and I look at them and go, okay, you're gonna get 12 back. And they're like, that's it. And the reason is why? You know why?
Not everybody.
And there's a couple of reasons. One is that the kids, some people are afraid of it.
Yep. What's the main reason?
Maintenance.
No, it's that you can only use it 3 or 4 months out of the year here. Whose value is so small in our area because we have all 4 seasons.
Yeah.
Unless it's heated, salt water, like the super duper, you don't get. You don't get. If I get a pool, it's gonna be like stealth plane. Like it's gonna be like a gun. You're gonna get the budget.
If you are lost, apply to your sellers for anything, especially the pool. Norm Miller, still right here.
And he's coming December 7th to do what does he do best? What is that called? Okay. What, scripting. He's doing scripting with us December 7th. So come to his class. He is the king of scripts. Go ahead, Preston.
Is you ask them, did you receive enjoyment for the time you've had this pool? The time you've had this addition? It's not one. We don't say that, we think it. If you've had your enjoyment out of it, then you have paid the value of that pool, or the value of that whatever now. You have received that back.
Got your money's worth.
Yeah.
So I'm telling you nothing.
Even for an in-ground?
Wow.
Depends on the neighborhood. If it's all by itself and it's not out in the Gary County by itself. If it's in Eastland, they get a value for it because believe it or not, there's a lot of pool in-ground pools in Eastland. There's a lot of in-ground pools in Waterford, there's a lot of in-ground pools in some neighborhoods. And there's a value to it. I've sold houses with pools. It's one a year for the last several years. Depends. Like a lot of things.
We do have 2 questions. We've let them think long enough. We have 2 questions. Do you adjust for solar panels? And if you do, how? That's a new one
that I've had to deal with personally.
That's a new one here. Solar panels usually have debt that comes along with them because they're like expensive to install. And number 2, the push that we've had for solar panels recently has just been recent because of the government rebate or whatever that you get. And 3, they can be considered personal property because they have a debt on them that is not included in the mortgage. So when you deal with solar panels, and I might be answering for everybody, but if you deal with solar panels, then you have 2 issues. One, if they remain, they have to pay off that debt. It cannot remain and then still have a lien on it. So that's coming out of their proceeds at closing. 2, they're going to want as much reimbursement for those suckers as they possibly get, and they're probably less than 50% dollar on dollar.
If that.
Because the perceived value versus the actual value is so long term that yes, solar panels are cool. They're hideous. Yeah. They are ugly, and it will detract a lot of people from purchasing a house. So I had someone come up to me today and say, "Hey, I'm thinking about getting solar panels. What should I do?" I'd be like, "Unless they go on the back side of your house, so nobody can see them ugly things, don't put them on."
And 2, it's
get a whole house generator.
It's a social thing, not a financial thing, because you're never going to get the value back.
No,
electricity saved. Not even close.
No, never. Did that answer? I hope that answered your question. I think I answered for. Paige, do you have a question?
Oh yeah, I was when Preston and Tara were talking about putting so I
so I mean entire neighborhood.
I know from a pool in Florida, but it's in Florida. It was expected.
I was gonna say, can you guys hear?
Hey.
Hello.
She's there and it's unmuted. She just might have to back. So maybe let's see. Okay. Yeah. Do you girls have any questions? I have one question. Yes. When it comes to a basement, permitted versus unpermitted, is there a different value? On unpermitted basement?
No, but I would give it a different monetary value.
I had buyers request to see the permits, and the seller had to tear open the walls and have the electrical inspector come out and re-inspect all the electric. It was the real.
Did they disclose that it was not permitted?
They didn't disclose that it was not permitted.
I had someone close up a window. Like imagine that wall with a big window in it, and they closed up the window and they didn't get a permit to do that, which they kind of sort of didn't need anyway. and I had to buy her walk over permitting. She was terrible, but I would say there's a lot of honeydews happening or has happened in our real estate world, and there will be a lot of things done, especially in my opinion, in a basement. I feel like that's just the biggest honeydew section of the entire house, to where permits aren't taken. And the only time you really truly need a permit is if you're doing something with plumbing, electrical, or you're interfering with the egress of a basement. Like just throwing up a wall, you don't necessarily have to have a permit. But the other things are super important. And I think there's home inspectors now that tag whether or not they were able to find any kind of permit up in the city or state or whatever. They're starting to pull those permits for the consumer. So I think on the listing side of it, if they say, oh, we finished our basement, the first question out of my mouth is, did you get a permit? Because if not, you don't want to be opening up walls, because I know in Fayette County, was that not in Fayette County?
It wasn't Fayette County.
Well, Fayette County, the building permit guy will not come back out and reinspect. So you must have got someone from the electric department to come out and just check it and make sure.
This much of each wall. Because they finished it. They finished it and just they're beautiful, and then permits.
Here's a question.
What? Is your egress effective? No.
Question for Christy. What if it's previous owner?
Then they have to disclose that they don't know if any permits were gotten. I think once in my opinion, and this is my opinion only, once the property transfers hand from one owner to the next owner, that current owner is liable. Yes, they're liable for the condition of the property, but they cannot speak to things that were done prior to them moving into the house. So if you say, you know, where's all the roofs, whatever it is, has 40-year shingles. Okay, give me the warranty for the 40-year shingle. Most sellers would laugh at you and go, really, are you kidding me? Yeah, I don't have that. Nobody has that. And I think that's kind of the same situation when it comes to, if the basement was finished when we got it, I can't say anything else about it. Have your inspector check. Yeah. I think this was a fantastic panel. I'm proud of you all. I'm going to tell Tara the same thing. But it doesn't look like, never mind, all good, she said. So pages on it. So you guys did fantastic. I would love to do another one of these in a couple months and switch our panels up and get some more. I think things like this, where you have conversations and people just listen to the conversation, you walk away, I learned something today. I have been told, and this is, don't hate me, I have been told that unfinished basements are about $10 or $12 a square foot. I'm sitting here listening to people tell me that because the price of the upstairs has inflated so much that in my mind, I hadn't regulated that to the basement, which is probably accurate. The basement square footage is probably higher now than $10 to $12. I remember when it was $4. Like you would literally go into the basement, and if it was concrete floor and concrete block, you'd be getting $4 a square foot. Yeah, $4. And I'm like,
That's
just.
exactly what you said, because the price.
And it never clicked with me until today. Exactly. Never clicked. The last question. This is a good one. 1 car versus 2 car. How much do you give for the little extra car garage? Is it kind of like just a guesstimate price?
Some neighborhoods are primarily 1 car garage, 2 car garage. Boy.
6 to 10? 6 to 10,000? Yeah.
10,000
every day. But
you can't build it for 10,000.
No, you can't.
In the other direction though, more than that. That's mostly 2 car, you got 1 car because you want some extra indoor space where you're paying for that indoor space, but it's a $10,000 garage.
Oh, we could go down there.
Most of them don't have a garage, and then they have a detached garage.
It's a plus. However, it's attached.
That's why it's this. And that's why pricing is difficult in the real estate business, because it is so specific to that house.
Georgia homeless. They built all those there where it used to be in the road, or small home. Sweet Clover, that other side of Sweet Clover, it was around next to that blue.
They're all red and blue and
yeah. all the tax garages. Brains, well, I knew 15 years ago, they put something on it. They designed it.
Yeah. You're awesome. Thank you guys so much for your time today. Have a great afternoon. Thank you to the 14 people that hung out on Zoom. This was a great talk. I'm very pleased with you all, and I think you're so smart still. Have a wonderful afternoon, guys. Thank you. See ya. It's so weird in the meeting on Zoom, you have to officially end the meeting. Like you can't just be like, see you bye.
You try to click leave meeting and then verify leave meeting.
Yeah, I'm totally gone, really gone. Promise I'm gone.
Was my mentor helping a lot. He would tell me, practice your tongue. I mean, if I wasn't doing anything else, I would just sit and try to do that. Yeah. And it made me feel comfortable.
My was about to strangle me right now. I told her before I left, I said, you get on that class. And she's like, because there's a house in Lancaster that has a 2-car attached, a 2-car detached, and an in-ground pool that is only fenced in around the pool. It's a ranch, no basement. And it's 1,700 square feet. The only things you can find are 3,000 ranches on basements, pools, no detached garage. So I said, I'm not doing this for you. I'm not doing this for you. You are going to figure this out. And she was on here.
Got a dart?
And so I told her, and she's using Cloud CNA, she's using RPR, and I was like,
yeah. And good Lord, too, because you can make the whole neighborhood and you see
the pools.
Yeah. And see the fun ones, the mom and the people need to get their circle. That's awesome. You guys did fantastic. Thank you. Thank you so very much.
I was going to throw back to Misty about some commercial stuff.
There was one thing I listed that I didn't sell. It was a commercial space, but we ended up.
You got one on, so
because it did.
It did tell us.
My first listing, I didn't sell. It turned into an Airbnb. I got leased for 3 years.
Holy smokes!
Yeah. At 12,000.
Give her all the details now.
Yeah.
And the last,
the last year the lease they get 14,000, and then once the lease expires, then I get to sell them. Which then I'll actually wow.
You get all of it. Like I told you, all that on your first list. I mean, all that.
All the hard stuff.
It was places. Also, place next door to it.
Holy.
Nice. So, yeah, I didn't actually sell that one.
So she said that.
I was like,
transition.
I will sell it one day though.
You think or themselves, like your parents would have at least.
It stays written.
So
yeah,
they leased it to sublease.
Yes. When you're an Airbnb,
and compare it to the one that you have,
really, thank you. Oh, you see
Can't imagine what they've done.
I was $1,000 a month.
All the furniture for I was like, wow. Yes. And there are like 3 different. Yeah. That's like one person came from here. And I think I had to get out of it.